guys! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and I guess this is becoming a little bit of a series for me because this is the second thing on my summer bucket list that I want to accomplish, which was to finish a sewing project. And as I filmed this, I did finish the project and I really won't spoil anything, but my goal was to sew a wearable top all by myself because my level of sewing is hand sewing or just beginner in general, and for me a sewing machine is the same thing as a printer. They're both very difficult to work with, and patterns in sewing, some of it makes sense, the other parts I'm like I have no idea what's happening. For a first time project I wanted to do a corset top that the Nava had done on her channel and also gave a template which made everything so much easier, and the way she explained it I feel like I could do it myself and follow along, so you can kind of watch me in this video figure everything out as I go. We don't really go through my struggles. This was really like a step-by-step almost tutorial, but like literally I've never sewn a wearable top before. You'd be surprised at how I managed. But yeah, I'm gonna let you continue the video, so I'll see you at the end. Alright, to begin, I've never sewn with a pattern before. I mean, I mentioned earlier my level of expertise is hand sewing and the occasional tailoring clothes that are a little too big for me. And not to mention, I'm working with two different types of fabric. I've only ever worked with cotton fabric, so this is more than what I am capable of doing. So here I'm obviously laying down my pattern that I printed out with computer paper, and it is kind of strange to puncture computer paper and fabric with a needle, but honestly it's fine considering I can reuse it later if I want to make another one. Personally, the hard part for me was cutting the fabric, which shouldn't be a problem, but get yourself a nice pair of fabric scissors and it'll be a lot easier. But also I am kind of a perfectionist, so I was cutting up to the pattern and it made me very anxious that I didn't know if the two pieces were going to be exactly the same or not, and as the saying goes, measure twice, cut once. But thankfully I had a lot of fabric to work with, so if I did mess up I could just cut another piece and use whatever that leftover piece was for something else. And the second fabric that I'm using is for the outside of the top, and this is more of like a satin silky material. Honestly, I don't know my fabric material at all, but this fabric was so pretty. I've had this type in mind for another project, but I said, you know what, I'm just making it for this top, and here we are. And then I made sure to line up right sides together, which both of these fabrics was kind of hard. I did have to mark which side was the nice side to flip them on the inside, and then I just sewed all my pieces together. I don't really know how to explain it, but this isn't really a tutorial. This is just me attempting to sew a top that is wearable on my own. Sewing machines used to scare me because I thought I would just get my hand stuck in the machine, but like that is not the issue. Or whenever the machine would get stuck, I would get frustrated. It's the same way as I am with a printer. If it gets stuck, I don't know how to fix it. But after this project, I think sewing's a lot easier than I thought. I mean, a sewing machine has always been pretty easy in my opinion, but whenever you get stuck, I get frustrated. So I was handling my frustrations to a minimum. My mom did help me here and there, but honestly, she barely helped at all. It was only when the machine got stuck and then I learned how to fix it on my own. So like towards halfway point, I was managing. The lighting clearly changed in this clip. So it is the second day of me working on this project. I think in total of hours, this took me about 10 to 12, I want to say. My video clips were like an hour in total, so I'm probably overestimating, but I was starting this around like 3 p.m. both days. If I didn't eat or sleep doing this project, I think I would have just finished this in a day and started straight from like 8 a.m. This part is probably relatively the easy part. The only issues I did run into was if my fabric wasn't lining up exactly right, which is impossible to do. When I was sewing, I gave myself some seam allowance, as you should, to cut some slits in the curved areas, like wherever the fabric kind of folds, so that way when I turn it inside out, it lays nice and flat. I'm really not sure why I'm explaining this like it's a tutorial, because I'm following a tutorial. This really isn't a tutorial. And then I decided to get a little fancy and try my hand at top stitching, which essentially I just put my fabric right side out and just sewed along the edges so everything kind of laid nice and flat. I'm pretty sure it's top stitching. I don't really know. It just made my fabric look a lot cleaner and a lot nicer, like I didn't just hand make this myself. This may have been the hard part, was measuring out where the zip ties will lay. It took some math, which I have not had math since 2019. So I tried to find the center point of the shirt, drew a small little dot, and then took a straight edge, which was a ruler in my case, and drew a straight line, and then kind of measure out how big the zip ties were. But I ended up just using like the edge of my sewing machine, like the little stopper, to sew along, because that ended up being like the perfect size for the ties. I didn't really need to measure that out, but it did help measure out where my next 4 other zip ties would go. And of course, I stuck it in the sewing machine just as it was and sewed down a straight line, which was a lot harder than I expected it to be, because technically there was nothing to base my straight line on except for the line that I drew itself. Yeah, that was a little difficult. Cutting the zip ties was one of the more difficult tasks in this project because I was using a pair of dull scissors. So if you ever do this, please use a good pair of scissors for this. I did not want to, because I'm saving my good scissors for any fabric or paper instead of plastic or cardboard. So these are my like industrial scissors that have gone very dull now. And then I didn't have any sandpaper on hand, so I chose to use some nail files to sand down the rough edges. I honestly have way too many nail files that this went to good use. Thankfully, I measured everything correctly, so they slid perfectly in the pockets I made for the zip ties. From there, I just cut the excess off, and that was the end of this night. As you can tell, the lighting has completely changed. Day 3 was essentially just finishing up everything. So here, since I didn't sew in my straps because I wanted to do the top stitch, I cut some thread in the places where I wanted the straps to be and sewed those down. And this was the most difficult part because I chose bias tape that was a little bit too thick, so I had to cut those in half. So when I was putting the bias tape at the edges to hide any imperfections, I also had to like fold that in half again, so it wasn't as thick. But in the end, I think I did a pretty okay job at it. I ran into complications with the bias tape at the end. Honestly, this took way longer than it should have, but here we are. I would like to say this was also the first time I actually used pins for sewing. I honestly would think I would keep stabbing myself, which kind of did poke myself a few times with the pins, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So anytime I would sew, I would just sew like a faux stitch so that way the fabric would stay together. But now I'm a pro at it. Obviously, I can tell I used like 80 pins for the binding. I'm going through a lot of firsts in this project because I've never used grommets before, so I feel like
the grommet puncher that I used might have been like too strong because it kept kind of breaking the back end of my grommet, but the front side looked pretty good. But I've never used grommets, so I actually don't know if I was doing it correctly. But as long as my holes are covered with this nice metal looking circle, I'm okay with it. And a tip for cutting holes like this, you kind of have to fold it into 4 so you get a little corner and then snip off the corner. If it's not large enough, just take a smaller pair of scissors and kind of make it larger. It helped a lot in my process. It was kind of hard to gauge how big the hole was because you don't want to get it too big that the grommet falls through and it just doesn't work out. And instead of re-measuring all of my holes, I just put the 2 fabrics together and lined them up as best as possible because technicality, one side is a little bit shorter than the other, so it didn't line up as perfectly as I wanted to. But once I did that, I just marked the holes and punched through all the grommets again. And lacing is always fun. I enjoyed this part, but when putting it on, it is not easy to do it by yourself. And here's the final product. I still have so much fabric left, so I might make like a shorter corset with the leftover fabric and maybe a pillowcase. Honestly, I don't know, there's so much left. I could have done half a yard instead of a whole yard. Let me know what else you want me to try out.
If it isn't obvious, I finished the corset. I did my makeup today and wanted to try the shirt on. So killing 2 birds with 1 stone with this outro because this shirt is really difficult to lace up by myself. I literally needed another set of hands to lace it up because once I put the shirt over my head, the ribbon gets lost, like it loosens itself up and I can't relace it myself from the back, so I need someone else to help me. It takes about 5 minutes to put on this shirt by myself. You're gonna stick with me with this shirt, but also I feel like this is proof that it is wearable. I've managed to make it wearable for myself. As a first time sewing project, I'd give myself a 9 out of 10. There's a little too much fabric here that I should probably have taken it in a little bit more because I don't really have boobs, but if someone did, they'd probably fill it out a lot better than I would. However, I don't think it's noticeable because I feel like this flatters my body type really well. And I mean, the fabric does look a little too close to my skin tone, but it's so pretty of a fabric. I love this type of pattern material. I considered this type to make a coat, but I have barely any experience in sewing, and I know coats and pants are 1 or 2 of the most difficult things to sew. I'm a little insane in wanting to do a coat a couple projects down the line, but if I do, I think this fabric would be so cute as an outer lining. And also, one of my K-pop biases wore a coat. If I ever do make this coat, you'll understand which person and what coat I'm talking about. Besides the point, I honestly am obsessed. I think it's one of my favorite pieces of clothing in my closet. I think I'm gonna wear it to the point that everyone will be sick of it and sick of seeing it. I think I'm gonna do a black version though with black ribbon straps instead. Like after this project, I feel like I'm obsessed with sewing now, and I did send a picture to some of my friends. One of the responses I got was, how was this my first sewing project? Because boating is something that she hasn't done before and she kind of takes some sewing classes, and I'm like, I mean, I use zip ties, but I also followed the tutorial, and I think Nava did a great job with the video because I managed to do this all by myself with very little help. Thankfully, the pattern fit me really well. I don't know how. I did see someone in the comments explaining how you can size up the pattern because I don't know, and I was honestly really grateful that we're both about the same size, that I was like, okay, I'll just work with it and run with it. And I ran with it and I accomplished. I can see why people are now obsessed with sewing and thrifting and thrift flips, because I get annoyed with thrift flips because I never really know how to do it myself, and now I think I understand. I'm gonna look up more projects for myself to do. If you would like to see more videos of this essence, please let me know in the comments below. If you did like this video, please leave a like and also subscribe to my channel and follow my socials. Super active on Instagram, pretty active on Twitter. So if you want to say hello, please do. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, bye.
She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her.